I'll begin by introducing myself. My name's Catherine Dupoulou-Ménager, and I'm the artistic director of Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival. Now, I'm assuming that many of you will already know who we are if you've joined us, but there may be people from the States who've never heard of us. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about what we do. As the name would suggest, we are a crime writers festival. We're based in Sydney, and we run a yearly festival, usually in September. This year, we're still trying to run a festival in September, but the world is seriously against us. Just as we thought we got out of the woods, Melbourne has closed down, and who knows, but we're still planning to go ahead. We will probably be live and socially distanced as well as virtual. There's nothing really good to be said about COVID, but the only remotely good thing is that we started to meet virtually. And if this hadn't happened, we probably would not have thought to ask Meg to join us. So, you know, we have to be positive about, I think we do, about what's going on. That's the only thing that I can think of. So many of you are now here, and I'm going to start properly. I'm going to welcome all of you to the third virtual event in the Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival series of Bad All Year interviews with crime writers. I'll say again that my name's Catherine Dupoulou-Ménager, and I'm the artistic director. But now what I want to do, which is a very important part of our tradition, perhaps for US listeners or viewers, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, to waters, and to culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, I've told you enough about BAD, and we really hope that we're going to be able to meet in person this year. And now let's get on to our interview. So as I said, the only good thing about these odd times is that we're doing these interesting meetings. And for our first international virtual event, I'd like to welcome Meg Gardiner for joining us from her home in Austin, Texas. I love that expression, Austin, Texas. Now, Meg is a particularly gentle name, I think, for a writer of anything but gentle thrillers. Meg's written 15 books. She writes series as well as standalone novels. And today, she'll be talking about her latest book in the Unsub series. And Unsub, for those of you who don't know, is unknown subject, unknown suspect, I suppose. And the book's called The Dark Corners of the Night. And welcome, Meg. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, even virtually.
Good. Well, you'll have to come here in the flesh one day when we can travel.
Exactly.
Meg will be talking to our very own creator of Psychopathic Killers, LA, or Louisa Larkin, whose latest gripping book is called Prey, and it is very nail-bitey, I have to tell you. So just to let you know briefly how we'll be running this event, Meg and Louise will be talking for about 40 minutes. Your Q&A will be off, but at about 40 minutes in, Louisa will say, okay, come up with your questions now, type them in, and a few minutes later, she will start to put them through. I'm going to disappear when they start, and then I'll come back at the end to thank them and say goodbye. So I think I'm now handing over to Louisa and Meg. Enjoy.
So welcome everybody. This is very exciting, and we've managed to get the time zones to work because of course it's 10 o'clock here in Sydney, and I believe it's 7 o'clock in the evening in Austin, Texas. So we've done it.
Friday evening, yeah.
Yeah, on a Friday evening. Yes, we're even on different days. I just first of all wanted to go into a little bit more about Meg's books. I'm very excited to be doing this conversation with Meg because I'm a big fan. And I remember back in 2018, Meg, you were at Thrillerfest. And it's my first and ever only time I've actually hopped over to New York and been Thrillerfest. And you gave an amazing talk about suspense, about how to write suspense, which I want to move on to a little bit later,
Okay.
How you actually create that terrible sense of dread that all
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did. I loved it. It was great. So just to clarify, Meg is author of 15 published books and a number of series. The first series was the Evan Delaney novels, first published in 2002. And China Lake, that was China Lake, and for which I understand you won an Edgar Award.
I did. Yes, Edgar Award for Best Paperback Original when it was published in the United States several years later.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, that's a great start, isn't it? She then went on to write a series featuring Joe Beckett, who is a forensic psychiatrist, and I believe there are 4 books in that. There are a number of standalone novels as well, really great standalones, and then the current series, which we're very much here today to talk about, which is the Unsub series, which has 3 books. The first one, which started it, Unsub, then Into the Black Nowhere, and then the current book, most recently released, The Dark Corners of the Night. Now, I would just like to sort of start to chat to you a little bit about the progress of your characters and how you've moved as an author, because in China Lake, which is the award-winning Edgar Award first novel, your central character, I guess, is a novelist with a law degree. She's a woman with a big heart, a quick tongue, and a hot temper, which means that she gets into trouble a lot. But in many ways, she's a perfectly ordinary woman. She doesn't have any particular law enforcement skills, as sort of I understood it. And gradually over time, your characters have moved more and more into law enforcement and, of course, into the FBI. But all these characters, the women in them, the central characters, seem to be very brave women who will pursue the bad guys no matter what. Do you think that might be why your books have sold millions of copies? Do you think that kind of central theme of a woman that can really make a difference, it appeals so well?
I hope so. I think the idea of ordinary women who may spend years gaining skills or may find themselves in some dangerous situation where it's up to them to rise to the challenge. I think readers love that, whether they're reading about Evan Delaney, who is a lawyer. And I should say, yes, my characters have moved gradually toward careers that involve crime, since I'm writing crime, suspense, thrillers. I wrote China Lake just to write China Lake. And I was very surprised when my publisher asked if I would write a sequel. So I had written about a woman who was an ordinary woman with no law enforcement or criminal law experience.
Yeah.
And after that, I wrote more stories about her and had to figure out reasons why there was some thread of crime that had infiltrated her life throughout the series. And eventually I decided, I had many ideas for other stories as well. I decided it'd be good for a crime novelist to write about a protagonist who has some reason to be involved with all sides. So I started going with Joe Beckett, who's the forensic psychiatrist, who she's a doctor. She's not a crime fighter. She consults with the San Francisco police on cases of indeterminate death to determine whether they're suicide, accident, or murder. So I was kind of gradually moving into that arena. The standalone novels have characters who are, the ordinary people who were thrown up against the wall by dangerous circumstance. And then eventually, when I came to the idea of Unsub, I realized I needed a character who was a professional in law enforcement. So I don't know whether I've just had an issue with authority all along, or I didn't want to do the research, but eventually I realized, yes, this new series needs a heroine who has been in a patrol car, who knows how to look at a crime scene and understand what's going on, and has the drive and the obsession sometimes to feel that somebody has to get these people off the streets, and that's got to be her. So that is the heroine of the Unsub series, Caitlin Hendricks.
Yeah, and I just remember a quote that I saw the other day from Stephen King. And I think he said something like, simply put, this is the finest crime suspense series I've come across in 20 years. So, and this is referring to your Unsub series.
That was the Evan Delaney series, yes.
Oh yeah, oh, was it the Unsub? Oh, okay, all right. But one of the things that many things that I found so mesmerizing about reading the Unsub series, and in particular, The Dark Corners of the Night, was the incredible detail that you reveal in the book that is so exciting about the actual process that this behavioral analyst for the FBI and the team that she works for, and she's the junior on the team, isn't she? How they have to tackle this serial killer who is incredibly clever and constantly seems to dodge them and defeat them, and their initial concepts of who this person might be tends to prove wrong, and then they had to look at it again. I've got to ask you, as I'm sure other people probably have asked you before, but how do you gather such a depth of information about how an FBI unit like that would actually work?
I personally have no background in law enforcement. I start by reading every single book that was written by someone who has worked for the Behavioral Analysis Unit. John Douglas wrote Mindhunter, which has been turned into the Netflix series. I have attended seminars given by the FBI for writers at their New York field office, which has been extremely enlightening and helpful. I've gotten to know retired FBI agents who do podcasts and write books about how pop culture gets the FBI wrong. So I go to them and find out what their work was like, because always, if you're going to write something, I write fiction, I make it up, but you want to have a kernel of authenticity. So talking to people and finding out about their work and their lives is where that comes from, to find out what motivates them, what drives them, what they love about their jobs, what they hate about their jobs, for all of us. And as long as you listen, then you're going to get a sense of what it's like. But it's a lot of reading, a lot of talking, and writing it down and hoping I get it right. And if I ever get a message, an email from someone who was a retired police officer or a retired FBI agent, or in the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Agency, or the daughter of a detective who says that sounded familiar, then I think, oh, good. That's the best validation I can get. And of course, in real life, I think that these agents do not have life or death experiences every day, of course. but if you're going to write a thriller, you better make it thrilling. So that's the fun of taking the spark of reality and exploding it into what I hope is a gripping page turner.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. It was the year that I was at Thriller Fest, and I was really lucky. I wanted to set a serial killer story in and around Seattle. It's a new book that's coming out next year. And I wanted an FBI agent character.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing exactly as you were doing. I was reading, I was watching any TV series or videos or anything that I could find. And then what I have as a friend is a detective in the UK, and I was grappling as to how you actually approach someone in the FBI, because I had heard that they had got pretty disappointed with authors who had misrepresented them, and therefore they become more difficult to approach, and less likely, particularly me being in Australia, you know, why would they want to help me? And so he was great. He managed to provide an introduction for me. So I met this amazing special agent, a woman. And I remember the very first time she agreed to meet me in a cafe. And so we met in a cafe, and I said, well, look, I don't know what you look like. And she said, oh, don't worry, I know what you look like. I thought, oh, no, she's checked me out. Will she turn up? Anyway, she did. And, you know, it was the most profound conversation. We had 2 hours together. And there were a number of times when she was talking that I honestly, I was almost brought to tears, because some of the things that she was describing that she had to do, and the awful things that she had seen, and I was just thinking, wow, this is actually real life, not the imaginary world that I'm creating. And I had infinite admiration for her, because I thought, I'm creating characters like the Olivia Wolfe character in Prey, who is gutsy and brave and gets into terrible trouble, but, you know, she'll keep going. And I'm thinking, well, she's only imaginary, whereas this particular agent is dealing with it in real life. And one of the stories that really moved me was the personal stuff, which I think that's what makes it real to people. And in your books too, that Caitlin has a personal life, a relationship, and so on. But she was telling me this story about, you know, she's obviously got, you know, children, and, you know, how they have to have a code word. She and her family are constantly in danger because of who she's put away. And she was telling me a story about a situation where she was with her kids collecting from school, and somebody was clearly about to threaten her children, and she had to use this code word. And you know, just the image of that, I was like, wow. So yeah, so I think, do you find it's sort of the humanity that you give Caitlin, the relationship, her self-doubts as being the junior, but her determination, you know, it's the characters themselves and the authenticity of them, that's what draws them to your books?
Of course, I think people will go with an author into a story that's probably, if we do our fictitious job correctly, we will have people holding their breath, biting their nails, gasping, fearing for the lives of these characters who are totally real to me, but they're not walking around in the physical world. But we want people to feel that feel fear, feel dread, feel excitement. So the way we get readers to come along with that is to have characters they care about. Characters who have to feel, you know, full-hearted, three-dimensional, totally human, interesting, with lives that can be very messy, but that they have a moral pole that guides them as they do the work. So that's the fun of trying to see who these people are and make them as real to readers as I feel they are to me, so that people will, write to me after they've read a book and say, well, I'm really worried about so-and-so, or will you please make sure that these two make up and get back together, or something like that. So.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So do you, with your research, you know, that you've done for this Unsub series, each book is inspired by a real serial killer. So, you know, the Zodiac Killer and so on. Does the research that you do into these real serial killings, which I assume, you know, you do a lot of depth into, do you find that the reality haunts you in any way? Do you find, because some of the stuff must be very disturbing? Do you find
it can become quite haunting if you really start to get into the research about the real cases, because the real cases have torn apart real lives.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
some of these cases, the Zodiac remains unsolved. The Zodiac could still be out there, and very likely is. And really getting into it can be quite unsettling, and dig into some of the, even the amateur sites that have tried to put together, citizen research into some of these cases, and you find retired detectives joining in the discussion because they are still haunted by the fact that they couldn't close the case. And you find out that they still go to victims, lay flowers on the victims' graves decades later. And the Night Stalker case was what sparked the Dark Corners of the Night. That was a home invasion killer who basically held Los Angeles in terror for more than a year in the 80s. I was living in the South, in Southern California at the time, and I remember the sense of fear and dread and this feeling that we were helpless against this phantom. So I started thinking about what kind of a person becomes the Night Stalker, and who are the people that try to put a face to him. So that was the genesis of the Dark Corners of the Night. And as far as research, that case didn't get terribly personal, but it turns out that another case came close. I don't know if you've heard of the Golden State Killer. Michelle McNamara wrote the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And she really helped put together decades of cases that this man who had committed 50 rapes in Northern California had also come down to Southern California years later and killed a dozen people, and including 4 people within walking distance of my parents' house, which nobody knew for 20 years. They just thought that these were unsolved tragic murders in the neighborhood, and who knew why these people had been killed. Well, turned out that they've been killed by this serial killer. And so that was quite a shocking undermining of my sense of what a safe suburban neighborhood I'd grown up in, to think of this guy who clearly stalked, surveilled, chose his targets, walking around the neighborhood while my mom and dad and little brother and sister were asleep inside. So I probably put that sense of uncertainty into some of the books, but again, these books are fiction.
Yeah.
And they're meant to be stories that take readers into a world of investigation that focuses more on, as you said, the investigators, the people who are hunting these unknown subjects, these terrible offenders who are trying to unmask them and put a stop to what they're doing. And I want every reader to have a emotional experience, to love it, to like I said, to hold their breath, bite their nails, but to feel like if they're on a roller coaster, it's not going to just veer off and and then fly off into the sky and crash. That in fiction we can bring people back safely because we control what happens and the outcome of the story.
That is the thing, because I was asked the other day, sort of why I thought people were so attracted to, let's face it, thrillers, crime thrillers are one of the biggest selling fiction genres in the world. So people are drawn to it. And I remember being asked a question about, why people were drawn to, horror and crime and sort of, stories where terrible things were happening. And one of the things that, I think about that is, well, a lot of the crime stuff is about trying to solve it. It's that puzzle that because I'm a big reader of thrillers as well as I love writing them. And like ideas like, I can work out who it is. I can work out who it is. And I'm gonna find the clues. And I'm gonna do it before the character actually does it. This sort of idea. You can get there before Hercule Poirot has solved the Agatha Christie crime or whatever. But I think it's also, in some ways, it's because the whole structure of a crime thriller is, not always, but generally, that there will be some kind of resolution at the end where your central character will succeed. And that, some form of justice, even though it might be bittersweet, will prevail, that the horrific killer, oh, sorry, I didn't know my phone was live at that point. I'm going to just turn that off. The killer, won't continue on this sort of rampage of horrific killings. Do you think that's true? Do you think this is almost like the structure of a thriller, a crime thriller, there's a safety net that readers know and feel that they can go on that adventure with you, but they feel safe that there's going to be a fairly good conclusion?
I think in general, definitely, that's why the genre is very popular. Certainly in the type of thrillers that U.S., UK, Australian authors write. That in general, there's usually a sense that justice does exist. That it's something that exists and is normatively good, and that should be sought, and that, as you said, in some way often can be achieved, even if it's broken or bittersweet. And that in so many thrillers or crime novels, chaos invades the world of the story, but there's an unspoken promise that by the end, in some way, that chaos will have been vanquished. So I think that's one reason so many readers grab the books and hold on to them.
One of the things that I think is incredibly difficult, I know I found it incredibly difficult to do, was to write from the point of view of a serial killer. To get inside their head, to write convincingly, so it doesn't sound, over the top or comic or ridiculous, or, there's this real balance that I struggled with in creating. He's more of an assassin character in Prey, but he's one sick puppy, and he's killed many people. And I made the decision to go inside his head and write from his point of view. And you do that too. You later on, not initially, because obviously you're building up to it, but you, the Midnight Man, you're from his point of view. How difficult do you find that to actually do that?
It is tricky. It's not necessary. Not every book requires it. Certainly, no. I remember The Silence of the Lambs has no scenes written from Hannibal Lecter's point of view. But whether you need to expose the antagonist's thinking, or you want to draw readers into their world, that's when you decide you're going to write from their point of view. And that the thing you have to go back to, so that you don't just create a stick figure, some, mustache twirling villain, or, Dr. Evil stroking his hairless cat, is to remember that you're creating a character who's human, that they, from their point of view, they're doing something that's justified. Yeah. Their vision is warped in some monstrous way, but in their mind they have reasons for what they're doing, and those reasons seem to be just overwhelmingly virtuous. so you have to try to understand how they got to that point and why they think the way they do. And remember that even killers have ordinary lives. They have to take the
Yes.
dog to the vet and pick up their dry cleaning and check in on their mom. And they have annoying neighbors and bosses too. So think about that. They have, as actually, and some people, some killers do, they have this mask of normality, which camouflages them and lets them get away with terrible things for years sometimes. But as an author, you want to be able to at least get a glimpse inside the viewpoint of someone who could convince themselves that what they're doing is justified. Remember, in their mind, they're the hero of their own story.
Yeah.
So as twisted as that might be, you have to try to understand how they get to that point and why they're acting out. But you don't want to stay there. You go back and you watch, I don't know, 30 Rock or what's a big comedy show in Australia right now?
I don't know, but I know exactly what you mean. And that's funnily, I've said to people, because they say, well, why do you sometimes alternate between thrillers and a dog detective story, which is humor, and I said, well, I need that. I need to back away from it all. I need to back away from the tension of the thriller, the horror of the thriller, some of the characters, and actually, have a crazy story about a dog that solves crimes that humans can't. And it's almost like therapy for me,
Right.
and it's joy. And I think that sort of leads me into, because I was going to sort of ask you, I remember when I was talking to this wonderful FBI special agent, and we were talking about coping mechanisms. And one of the things that she was talking about is, I said, well, so how do you find dealing with the horror that you do at work, and then you go home to your children, your husband, your everyday life at home? And she was talking to me about the process of how in their office they have washing machines and dry cleaners, and they take all the clothes off that they wear during the day, and they get all cleaned there, and they change into something completely different. They wear completely different clothes. So it's almost like this, and they have showers. And this almost like physical cleansing process. And then she, as she drives home, she almost like transforms herself back into that person underneath. How do you find that you sometimes need coping mechanisms when you're deep into a story, like your current book?
I hope I don't. I don't know about you. I mean, I find it very easy because it's fiction. I get extremely obsessed with what I'm writing, but I'm aware that it is fiction, and I can snap my fingers and start making jokes about something else because I do wake up in the middle of the night, and then not scared, but thinking about when it's quiet, you can sometimes go have a clearer view of your story and really start figuring out how to torture your characters and make the readers want to turn the lights back on.
Yeah. No, I do that. I have a little notebook next to my bed, and something will suddenly come to me, and my poor husband. So it'll be like, I've got to write this down right now. I can't forget it. And it's amazing how these things come to you at the oddest times. I also find that when I'm swimming, like, it's really weird. It's the I don't know, it's just this repeated motion of going up and down, the lengths in a pool. And I'm challenged with, I don't know how I'm going to get my character out of this situation. I've got them into the worst situation, which of course you want to do. You want to put pressure on them. You want to get them into a terrible situation, but I don't know how to get out of them. And then I'm swimming and I go, oh, that's it. Do you have certain situations other than, perhaps at night, where you'll find you have to go for a walk or something to try and solve a situation in your book?
Yeah, go for a walk, go for a run, get away from the screen, get away from anything, social media, the laundry, whatever is dividing your attention, and let your mind work on another level. I remember Walter Mosley saying, talking about writing, and he said, the novel is bigger than your head. That's what you have to remember. You can't hold it all in at once, and much of it is going to be developing unconsciously. So you have to give it space to bubble up and reach you. And I found that very reassuring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now at this point, I'm going to start reminding our wonderful participants that are listening to us chat away here, that if you want to start recording some questions for us, there's the Q&A section, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and you just tap in your questions. And I'm just going to ask Meg another question myself, but it's worth starting to put those questions in, because then I'm going to go to them and start feeding them through. So Meg, I just wanted to, I guess, talk a little bit more about how you create suspense. Because there really is, in, you know, The Dark Corners of the Night, I was reading it. I also listened to it on audio as well. It's very interesting hearing the actor that's been chosen and how it's been interpreted. It's really interesting.
Hillary Huber, she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. She was great, absolutely great. And sort of, you know, meaning to turn off the light, but of course, you know, you're classic turner, so I keep going. Do you want to talk just a little bit about how you create suspense in a book like The Dark Corners of the Night? Are there any sort of particular techniques that you use?
Well, it took me a long time to learn how to create suspense. Suspense doesn't just mean a crazy action scene or someone screaming. Suspense, I mean, dramatists have been figuring out what suspense involves since the days of, you know, the Greek playwrights. Aristotle wrote about suspense, which is, you know, creating a sense of anticipation and uncertainty in your audience, where there's a danger looming and it's unclear what's going to happen, that the danger could hit and then there's sadness, or the danger could be avoided and there's you know, there's celebration. So the idea when you're writing suspense is to create that anticipation and dread, and you do that by raising a question, creating a problem early on, and then dragging it out. You don't resolve the problem anytime soon. You try to keep everybody hanging on a knife edge. And if you solve one problem near the start of the book, make sure that there's a fallout that turns and makes everything worse. So that's one way you create suspense from the beginning. And you always, as a novelist, then as the story develops, you want to raise the stakes. If you start out a story where the jeopardy seems to be a storm or a lightning strike, or somebody might lose a job, that's the stakes, then as the story develops, then maybe it's got to become more dangerous, more threatening, until by the time you get to the end, the stakes are life and death. And for the protagonist especially, and that they have to take some great irreversible leap of faith and courage that might come at huge personal cost.
Absolutely.
And leave the outcome uncertain, but by that point, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, morally resonant and devastating to them and everybody that they know. That's the way you create suspense. That I don't know how much longer you want to talk about it, but there's things that Hitchcock, of course, Alfred Hitchcock was the master of creating suspense.
Yes.
And there were ways that he did it, which he talked about, exactly. If you have a scene where two people are chatting in a cafe, and they chit chat for 5 minutes, and then suddenly a bomb beneath the table explodes. That will shock and surprise the audience, but there is no suspense at all in that, because all you've been doing is forcing people to listen to this drivel for 5 minutes. But if you open the scene by having some faceless person sneak into the restaurant before it opens and place a briefcase that has wires, and you can hear it ticking. They place that beneath the table, and you see someone set a fuse for noon, and then at 11:55, you have these two people come in and be seated at that table. Suddenly, the suspense is there because the audience knows more than the characters and are helpless to intervene. So that's another way you can create suspense.
No, that's great. That's great. So we've got some really fantastic questions coming in. So if you don't mind, Meg, I might just move on to those.
You bet.
One is from Philip. Has there been a single thriller, a particular thriller that has unsettled you or stayed with you long after you put it down?
Oh, so many. I would definitely, of course, I mentioned The Silence of the Lambs earlier, and that really is just so far above and beyond so much else, because the characters are so fresh, unique. We'd never seen anything like them. You have Lecter, but you have up against him Clarice Starling, this young, inexperienced, but smart, tenacious, very brave person trying to solve this crime. And as disturbing as that book is, you cannot ever forget her or what she does to solve the case. So that would be my number one of thrillers.
Okay. Another question is from Jane. Are there any triggers that start you off on a new story or a new series? So I guess the question is, what is your inspiration for a new series?
You never know. Anything can be an inspiration or a trigger. It might be something I read in the news. In the case of Unsub, it was thinking back to when I was a kid and saw a police drawing in the newspaper of a man wearing an executioner's hood with a bizarre symbol on the front, holding a handgun. And I asked my father, "What's that?" And he said, "That's the Zodiac." And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Well, he kills people." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "He likes it." And that just he knew I would have read the newspaper anyway and found out if he hadn't told me, but that just blew my tiny little mind. So I started thinking that got me interested in the case. And then as an adult, I thought, okay, the Zodiac went away. Nobody caught him. What's to stop him from coming back? What's to stop a cold case from turning hot again? And that was the genesis of Unsub, about a legendary killer who had disappeared, and then 20 years later picks up where he left off. But you never know.
I can't imagine what the time difference is like at the moment in the UK, because I think it must be the small hours of the
morning. It's 1:45 in the morning.
Okay, then we have got a message from Rachel in the UK. So there you go. How many hours do you guys write per day? She says, I tend to overwrite sometimes, and I know it's not healthy. Meg, how do you balance your day, and what are the hours you tend to put in per day?
It really depends on what stage of the project I'm working on. I'm at. I mean, between brainstorming, outlining, drafting, revising, copy editing, proofreading, it could be anywhere from 2 hours to 14, really, depending. I mean, I'd love to be able to sit down. I mean, you really need a couple of concentrated stretches where you don't have any interruptions, at least an hour 90 minutes, 2 hours would be, you know, ideal. But if it's very hard to keep your mind fresh and engaged after 8 hours if you're trying to draft something. But I don't know about you. When I'm doing a rough draft, I try just to get the words down on the page. I train myself just to spew, not to self-edit with the first draft. Otherwise, you can fiddle around and mess around with
Fiddle forever, and you never, yeah.
Pretty sentences.
I think interruptions. Yeah, I think interruptions. Sorry for interrupting you, actually. Just then, I didn't mean to. Sorry. Interruptions are the worst, and they come in all sorts of ways. But breaking that moment that you're actually in that world and it's all coming and it's right, you know, you're writing it and you're feeling good about it, and then something takes you out of it. Yeah, I think I also find that I have, and this may be just me, but I find a 2-hour threshold where I know the quality of my writing has started to go down because I need just, even if it's just make myself a cup of coffee.
Precisely.
Or it might mean I'll take the dogs for a walk or something, you know, just that break, because there's this sort of, I feel like there's this curve that goes on and I'm really getting into it, and then I can feel myself tapering off. So there's that. But I don't know whether you do, but I try and keep emails and social media until the evening, because I find those things distract the hell out of me.
Yeah. Morning, noon, and night as a way you can do that if you can. But when I'm drafting a novel, I've trained myself to I aim to write 2,000 words a day if I can, and that tells me that I just need to write. That's my way of telling myself, don't self-censor, just get the story on the page. And I know how long it takes to type an entire novel, so I better keep the pedal down.
Now there's a question here which is from Valerie, and it says, there we go. Do you think the Black Lives Matters movement will have impact in future in terms of how police and law enforcement are portrayed in crime writing? I noticed that in your books, you have a whole diverse range of backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and so on in your central characters. And indeed, one of your behavioral analysts, I think she's an African-American lady, is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that topic, whether things are going to change in future.
I think they need to. I think they must. And I certainly hope they do. I hope that our entire genre and publishing industry is thinking long and hard about how to raise up own voices authors, marginalized authors, writing from their own perspectives, for established authors to step back and take a look at how we've been portraying crime and punishment and law enforcement in our novels, to really examine how who gets the time, the energy, and the benefit of the doubt as far as truth telling and how power is portrayed. So I think this is I hope it's a really great push for all of us to really make some serious changes. I could talk about this for a long time, but I hope it makes a big difference, and I include myself in needing to cross-examine the way I write.
And look, I absolutely agree with you, and I think and hope that things will change in terms of key characters in crime fiction and so on, and the authors. I do remember though, when I was writing this new book set in Seattle, which has an FBI special agent character who is African American. And I remember someone saying to me, oh, well, should you as an Australian white female be writing this? And I was a bit taken aback. I was thinking, but okay, this FBI character is a heroic character. It's, you know, saying, you know, this is perfectly normal. You know, he's a heroic character. I was a bit taken aback by that. Have you ever had anyone sort of challenge you in that way?
No, not at all. But most of my protagonists have been Caucasian.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's no way to. I think it would certainly be wrong to say I would have to exclude anybody that doesn't match my background from the story. That's inauthentic in itself. I think if an author wants to write from a point of view character and their story, someone who is from a marginalized community, it's important to interrogate yourself and say, can I do this justice? Is this going to be too far beyond my range? Whether you need to make sure that you run this by, even if you pay an editor to do a sensitivity read and say that, you know, you're missing all kinds of things. This would be, you know, this is what is more realistic. I've never had anybody tell me to eliminate other ethnic groups from my fiction.
Okay, well, that's good.
And there are female African-American FBI agents and ATF agents. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. So I just think we've got time perhaps for...
I can talk short. I'll talk quick.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and go through quickly. All right, sorry. Okay. One of the next questions is you mentioned the ghost. You mentioned the ghost throughout the Unsub series, who is a serial killer that hovers in the background. You mentioned the ghost quite poignantly at the end of this current book. Is the ghost going to become the next book? There you go. Give it away.
Okay.
Well, no, don't if you don't want to.
We have a spoiler jar at my house. Some people have a swear jar. We have a spoiler jar. So
the answer is we'll keep that quiet.
The answer is my job is keeping you in suspense.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
The ghost is a serial killer who lurks in the background and is carried over nebulously from book to book and has no reason to disappear. We'll put it that way.
Okay, good. All right. Yes, so there's a question from Greg. As you move on to each book involving the same protagonist, do you have to find new ways for her to grow and develop?
That's a good question. Series characters,
yeah,
you have to walk a middle road, because readers come to love a character for who they are, and you don't want them to change completely over the course of a series, but you don't want them to stagnate either. So when you write a series, you want to start by giving them a bit of a past that you can explore as the books go on, and a future as well, goals, fears, longings, that surprises, so that they can stretch and mature, but that someone who picks up one of the later books in the series wouldn't be totally shocked to see who you're writing about compared to the first book. So.
Another question from Anne is, do your characters ever run away from you? As in, they create a life of their own, and you find they're doing things. I think that's what Anne is meaning. That they take their own course and they surprise you.
I try to keep them under control. In my head, if they're out of control, then something's wrong. But I try to figure out what their emotional journey is going to be in the book. But if I'm in the middle of writing and I see something better, more creative, fresher, I will take that journey. I've never let a main character totally run away. I have had minor characters who just refuse to die. And Oscar, the weed smoking hacker, was supposed to get it in the first scene he appeared in, but I decided that the heroine needed a buddy. So instead of the bad guy walking in the door and blowing him away, Oscar says, "Hey dude, come sit down and I'll go heat up a pizza." And he walks in the kitchen, walks out the back door and just runs. So I couldn't let him go.
No, I have one. I'm going to just jump in with one quick question, because I've been dying to know. I understand The Dark Corners of the Night is to be an Amazon TV series. When can we expect to see that? Good
question. It has been optioned by Amazon Studios for development as an hour-long television drama. And Lawrence Trilling, who currently is the showrunner and executive producer for Goliath with Billy Bob Thornton for Amazon, is developing it. COVID has thrown every schedule into disarray, but they're assembling the writing team and working on the pilot. So later this year, next year, we shall see. I'm very excited though.
Yeah, well, no, congratulations. That's great. Now, I think we will have to conclude the questions now, I'm afraid. I think we're literally about to run out of time. I just want to say, Meg, that this has been a joy to talk to you. I really do appreciate you working with us on the difference in the time and so on. But also,
I want to thank Rachel, who's up at 2 a.m. and
well, yeah, I know. I was so delighted to see that. We love Rachel. We love her. But also to remind people that Booktopia is the book supplier for this event in Australia, and that if you, as I hope you will be, terribly excited as a result of this discussion, that you will go out and buy The Dark Corners of the Night.
And pray.
Sorry?
And pray.
Oh yes, and pray. Yes, buy mine too. That'd be great. I think I pass back to Catherine now.
Indeed. Thank you so much, both Meg and Louisa. That was, what was particularly interesting to me is that you were talking a lot about writing. So not just about the stories, but about the process of writing them. And I think that's what happens when you get a couple of writers together, which you don't necessarily if you get an interviewer. And yes, I'll repeat what Louisa said. If you don't yet have your own copy of Meg's books, and indeed of Louisa's, go to Booktopia in Australia and order your copies. They will send them to you. So thank you. That was really interesting. And I'll end by whetting our audience's appetite about our next event, which is on August the 25th, which will see Megan Goldin, who is a rising star of Australian psychological crime fiction, I think we could say, talk about her latest book called The Night Swim, which has had pretty good, she's had pretty good reviews for her books in the past by people like Lee Child and Harlan Coben. So, she's working certainly in the right direction. And then, of course, we hope to see you live at the State Library of New South Wales. Sign up to our mailing list and find out a bit more, badsydney.com. I hope you've enjoyed this event as much as I have. Thank you so much again, Meg. And thank you, Louisa, who liaised with Meg to organise everything. See you all again in a month. It's been wonderful. Have a lovely day or night or wherever you are. Spend the rest of your time fruitfully and safely. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.